You need to understand he was the only reason we hadn't lost Baxter, Corvest, and Damson by Q3, I said. But by that point, no one in the room was listening. Or maybe they were, just not to me. The new CRO, Dalton Mays, all jawline and startup swagger, leaned back like he'd already solved the entire firm with one LinkedIn post. That's how it always starts, with some dude who talks in bullet points and thinks acronyms are strategy. But let me rewind. Before everything unraveled like cheap thread from a knockoff Hermes tie, Virgin was a calm kind of chaos. We didn't need slogans or standing desks. We had Ethan Kane, the kind of guy who made boring into a survival mechanism. His desk was always clean. His Slack status never changed. You knew if Ethan pinged you, it wasn't small talk. It was gospel. I sat across from him for 4 years, watched him pull off quarterly saves like he was rearranging paper clips, all while sipping black coffee from a chipped world's okayest consultant mug. Every crisis slid across his desk eventually, and every time, he solved it without asking for credit. The man didn't need a corner office. He was the damn load-bearing beam. So when Dalton strutted in like a TikTok business coach and called him overhead in front of the whole senior team, I swear I heard something snap. Not in Ethan. He didn't flinch. No dramatic pause, no eyebrow twitch. He just nodded, like a man watching the tide come in, already calculating the flood map. Dalton's decree was simple. All client communication goes through HR now. That includes you, Ethan. We're consolidating touch points. Too many cowboys, not enough control. Ethan said one word, acknowledged. Then he opened his laptop. Pause here for 1 second. If you're enjoying this story, and if you want more unhinged corporate drama told from the inside, please hit that like button and subscribe. 97% of you watch without subscribing, and it helps our team more than you know. Now, back to the implosion. The thing is, no one asked why Ethan acknowledged it so easily. No one remembered that 3 years ago, during Virgin's hypergrowth sprint, legal was drowning. We were onboarding clients faster than we could print the paperwork. Back then, Ethan had temporarily taken over as legal liaison for client strategy, helped draft half the contracts still floating around today, including Clause 6C. Clause 6C was just a patch, a band-aid we slapped onto contracts to keep onboarding moving. In the event of role disruption, the assigned strategist shall retain interim advisory privileges for client continuity unless explicitly revoked in writing. At the time, no one blinked. It sounded like good service. Continuity, clients liked it. Legal assumed someone else would come back and clean it up. No one ever did, which meant Ethan, with his dry chuckle and encyclopedic memory, had just been handed the world's sharpest letter opener and invited to cut himself free. But again, no one saw it. They just kept snickering in meetings, calling him the librarian behind his back. They laughed at his checklists, his perfectly labeled folders, the way he still used Outlook rules like it was 2008. I heard someone joke once that he wore the same pair of brown loafers every day because he didn't know they made others. What they didn't know was those loafers were the only reason 26 enterprise clients hadn't fled to Deloitte by now. By the end of that first day, Ethan had reviewed every one of those client contracts. I caught a glimpse of his screen once, just long enough to see the subject line, continuity notification, in accordance with Clause 6C. HR was CC'd. No reply, just silence. He packed up that night like usual, quiet, deliberate, no stress in his shoulders, just calm. I watched him pause at the elevator, check his watch, and smile. Barely noticeable, but there. That's when I realized Dalton hadn't won a power play. He'd just walked his entire portfolio off a cliff. And Ethan had already set up a soft landing. You ever witness a car crash in slow motion? Not the metal, but the silence that follows. That's what it felt like in the Thursday leadership sync when Dalton Mays finally showed his teeth. It wasn't rage, wasn't chaos, just a clean, surgical evisceration dressed in a navy Ted Baker suit and some overused startup lingo. He stood at the front like he was teaching kindergarten. One hand in his pocket, the other flipping through his iPad like client retention was just another tab to swipe away. "Look," he said, pacing like a TED Talk dropout. "Too many of you are freelancing communications. Clients don't need 12 points of contact. They need one. Starting today, all external comms, all go through HR for alignment. No exceptions. That includes you, Ethan, especially you." No one moved. I felt my stomach drop. The air went stiff, like the temperature dropped 10 degrees. Ethan didn't blink, didn't shift. He He just closed his notebook slowly, like he'd heard someone spill coffee, not detonate his entire department's autonomy. Dalton didn't stop there. Of course he didn't. We're not paying 6 figures for hallway therapists. Clients want deliverables, not diaries. You're great at smoothing things over, Ethan. But frankly, client hugs don't scale. We need rainmakers, not overhead. The silence that followed could have shaved drywall. My jaw clenched so tight it squeaked. The room waited for Ethan to push back, to say anything, a single protest, even a sarcastic exhale. He gave them none of it, just a slight nod, as calm as if he'd been told to switch fonts on a PowerPoint. Then he spoke, and I'll never forget how measured it was. Understood, he said. Going forward, HR will be included on all client communications under my name. Dalton gave a smug little chuckle. Glad we're aligned. Ethan looked down at his notebook, flipped to a blank page, wrote something, then closed it. And in that quiet, unreadable face, I saw the seed of something. Not rage, not revenge, just inevitability. Back at our desks, I caught a glimpse of his screen. Outlook was open. Folders already sorted. Drafts were building, one by one, like clockwork. You'd think a man being publicly humiliated would take the day off. Drink, rage, vent. Ethan did none of that. He skipped lunch, didn't flinch when someone in sales cracked a joke about him becoming HR's assistant, didn't answer when the CRO's executive assistant sent over a calendar request labeled Role Redefinition Touchbase. He just typed, methodically, one hand on his mouse, the other on a notepad that still had the same black Pilot G2 clipped to the spine. Same as always. I passed his desk around 4:30. His phone buzzed, one of his legacy clients. He picked up, calm, steady. Yes, I heard him say. Just a courtesy note. Your continuity protocol has been activated. Will ensure zero disruption. Pause. No, nothing negative, just procedural. Pause again. Of course. You'll receive everything in writing. HR is looped in. He hung up and didn't look at me when he caught my eye, but under his breath, I swear I heard him say it, not loud, just enough. If HR wants everything, they're gonna get everything. Then he cracked his knuckles and opened draft number 11. The thing about Ethan Kane was he never raised his voice, never made a scene. You could cut his salary, swap his chair, cancel his parking spot, and all you'd get was a courteous email and a calendar hold. That kind of restraint makes people nervous, because it means you're never sure when he's actually planning something. Friday, 6:08 p.m. Most of us had already spilled out into the parking lot, venting about Dalton's centralization initiative over $11 wine and limp sushi. Not Ethan. He was still at his desk, screens glowing like twin furnaces. Quietly, precisely, he typed, then paused, then typed again. I don't know when he left. But I know what he did when he got home. At 7:12 p.m., a digital footprint popped up, quiet as a mouse on carpet. Ohio Secretary of State, Articles of Organization submitted. Continuum Advisory Partners, LLC, registered to a private address with no link to Virgin, no LinkedIn update, no announcement, just a legal ghost formed out of thin air. Next came the document pulls. Ethan still had access to our contract archive, a privilege no one revoked because, well, no one realized he'd ever need it. Virgin had grown like mold in a damp basement, fast, disorganized, and without structural inspection. In the early days when legal was a 2-person panic room, Ethan had stepped in, not for credit, just to stop the bleeding. And in that flood of templates and frantic email chains, he had inserted something. Clause 6C. It was a patch, a legal paper towel soaked in jargon. In the event of role disruption or reassignment, the current strategist may, for the purposes of continuity, maintain interim advisory privileges unless explicitly revoked by counsel or senior operations. Legal never flagged it. Sales never questioned it. And clients? They loved it. Continuity was gold in our line of work. Nobody ever removed it. Ethan reread it that night, then pulled up every active client file tied to his name. 26 in total, each one a Fortune 500 headache with a human face attached. People who trusted him, not Virgin. Him. He didn't hesitate, didn't gloat, just started building a folder. One termination memo per client. Not angry, not accusatory, just factual, calm. Per the continuity clause established in our onboarding agreement, Section 6C, please be advised that I am initiating interim advisory protocol effective immediately. No services will be disrupted. You are not being dropped. You are being transferred cleanly to a new independent firm built to support your current and future needs. CC, HR@virginstrategies.com. BCC, legal@continuumadvisory.com. He didn't mass send them. That would have been reckless. No, he queued them, timed, sequenced, a memo every 90 minutes, 4 before midnight, 10 more by sunrise. Each email polished like a final invoice. Clean language, zero aggression, nothing to trigger red flags. At Virgin, HR was still asleep. Dalton had flown to LA for a growth summit. Legal had no idea they were about to be implicated in their own ghost clause. And finance, they were blind, because from their dashboard, no revenue had technically vanished. Yet. Back in his apartment, Ethan didn't celebrate. He just poured one neat bourbon, set it beside his laptop, and opened client number 12's file. I imagine the only sound was the soft clink of ice and the tap of keys as he drafted the next notice. Ethan didn't retaliate. He realigned. Surgically. And this time, every cut was by design. Monday started like every other over-caffeinated panic cycle. Stale bagels, overlapping Zooms, and Dalton Mays gliding through the floor like a man who just fired the last adult in the room. He spent the morning talking about synergies and message hygiene, while half the staff mentally priced out LinkedIn Premium. But down the hall, in a little-used Outlook inbox labeled HR@virginstrategies.com, something was building. At first, nobody noticed. Ethan's CC'd emails came in at a steady rhythm, one every few hours. Always the same tone. Clinical, lawful, nothing dramatic. The subject line always included the client's name and a phrase no one paid attention to until it was too late. Continuity transition memo. HR assumed it was Ethan venting. Passive-aggressive compliance. You know the type, send 100 emails to prove a point, like a teenager doing the dishes loudly. They didn't read them. Just flagged them for review. By noon, Dalton had already called the emails cute during his stand-up with the SDR team. Old guard's last dance, he smirked. He wants us to panic. We don't. But clients did respond. Quietly, decisively. Understood. Appreciate the heads up, Ethan. Following your lead. Please include billing details for your new firm. Each message was time-stamped. Some replied within minutes. These weren't hasty reactions. They were premeditated exits. People didn't just like Ethan. They trusted him, enough to jump ship without blinking. By the end of day 1, 4 major accounts were already in motion. No noise, no flares, just gone. Tuesday morning, someone in finance finally noticed. Quarterly forecast was short by low 7 figures. One line item flagged red, then another, then 4. Client disengaged, no invoice expected. At 11:17 a.m., a junior controller, smart but 2 weeks in, pinged legal with a note. Is Ethan allowed to offboard accounts? He's not in CRM anymore, but his name's still listed as point of contact on the vendor portal for a different firm. Attached was a screenshot from an enterprise SaaS vendor portal. The new firm wasn't labeled Continuum Advisory, though. It was CAP Global Services, Inc. Same initials, different shell. Legal missed it entirely until that moment. And suddenly, someone did open those HR emails. The language was flawless. Not just careful, airtight. No breach, no aggression, just plain binding transitions backed by a clause they left intact. Ethan hadn't stolen anything. He had followed policy, a policy they signed off on. The general counsel, Melissa Wu, read through 6 of them, then called HR, then called Dalton. "What the hell is going on?" she asked. Dalton laughed. "He's being petty. It's posturing." Melissa didn't laugh back. She asked a question no one was ready for. Did anyone formally revoke Clause 6C? Silence. By 3:00 p.m., 8 clients were officially removed from Virgin's active portfolio. 6 of them had submitted new contracts, verbatim replicas of their original Virgin agreements, just minus the Virgin header, and all of them now bore the new advisory firm's signature, Ethan Kane, Principal Advisor. Dalton still hadn't read a single clause, but the storm had already started, and Ethan was 2 clients into day 3. Calm, calculated, waiting for the walls to creak. Wednesday morning, the tension hit like a migraine behind the eyes. You could feel it in the way people whispered in Slack instead of pinging publicly, how suddenly every open plan desk felt a little too exposed. The usual office murmur had been replaced by that heavy, anticipatory silence, the kind that comes right before a lightning strike. It was finance that finally forced Dalton to notice. By 9 o'clock a.m., two analysts had already flagged an 11% drop in projected Q2 MRR. By 10:15, the spreadsheet had a name: Kane effect. That's what they were calling it. Half joke, half warning. By lunch, the number was pushing 17%. Dalton stormed into the glass conference room like he could yell his way back into control. He had that kind of fury only entitled men can produce. Frustrated not by the fire, but that it dared burn without his permission. "Where the hell is Ethan?" he barked. "Someone get him in here, now." I got the message. Popped my head into Ethan's office, if you could even call it that. Just a corner with a desk, some books, and that ancient mug. He was reviewing another contract. Cool as a goddamn glacier. "Dalton wants you," I said. He looked up, deadpan. "For communications?" I nodded. He stood, straightened his sleeves, and walked with the kind of unbothered tempo that infuriates insecure men. When he entered the room, Dalton didn't even look up from the whiteboard he was scribbling on like a madman. Red marker, arrows, question marks, the illusion of a plan. "Ethan," he said, not turning around. "Sit." Ethan didn't. "What's happening with Baxter and Cordell, and why the hell did Corvest just send us a disengagement notice that cites you as their new point of contact?" Ethan tilted his head slightly. No fear, no theatrics, just surgical calm. "Per your directive," he said, "I no longer handle communications directly. All client-facing materials are routed through HR." Dalton froze, turned slowly, marker still in hand. "Don't be a smartass." Ethan blinked. "I'm simply complying. You made it clear. All comms go through HR. I've honored that fully. You'll find every email documented, CC'd, BCC'd, time-stamped." That's when Melissa Wu stepped in. Legal. Face like she hadn't slept since undergrad. She had a folder in her hand, printed and highlighted, actual paper. She dropped it on the table like it weighed 50 pounds. "These are the emails," she said, "from the past 4 days." Dalton flipped one open, skimmed. "What is this legal garbage? Clause 6C? What the hell is Clause 6C? HR's director, Stacy, paled. I thought it was a placeholder," she mumbled. "Nobody ever asked about it." Melissa shot her a look that could have bent steel. "It's not a placeholder," she snapped. "It's a clause Ethan inserted 3 years ago when we were onboarding without full legal oversight. It was never rescinded." Dalton threw up his hands. "So you're telling me this guy exploited some dusty clause to steal clients?" Ethan's voice cut in, quiet, sharp, undeniable. "I didn't steal anyone. I followed the agreement. Clients are free to invoke the clause at their discretion during role disruption. You disrupted the role. I notified HR. Clients made their decision. I've kept everything compliant, transparent, and fully documented." He pulled a small notepad from his jacket, flipped to a page, held it up. "Today's notices," he said. 5 more accounts initiating continuity transition. HR is CC'd. Dalton's hand curled around the whiteboard marker like he might snap it in two. His jaw clenched, words caught between denial and desperation. Melissa's voice was flatter now, resigned. "And there's more," she said. "Ethan's firm was registered before the first notice went out. That means premeditation, but not misconduct. There's no clause preventing him from forming an independent entity. We never made him sign a non-compete." HR flipped another page in the folder. Some of the clients even quoted 6C themselves in replies. Verbatim. "They're more familiar with our contracts than we are." Ethan looked over at Dalton, calm, icy, unmoved. "I'm not the disruption," he said. "You are." Then he turned, walked out, left the door open, and just like that, the floor collapsed beneath them, one clause at a time. The meeting invite hit like a fire alarm. "Emergency, all hands, exec mandatory, 3:30 p.m. Subject line in all caps, red exclamation mark, no agenda. That's how you know it's not a meeting, it's a funeral. The body just hadn't been officially declared yet. They pulled us into the boardroom early. No catered coffee, no soft jazz playlist, no polished smiles. Just tension so thick it made the fluorescent lights feel like interrogation bulbs. Dalton was already inside, pacing like a tiger behind invisible bars, every so often muttering, "This is sabotage," under his breath. His whiteboard had devolved into a mess of arrows and client names all circled in red, like a crime scene, like a confession. Melissa Wu walked in next, Virgin's general counsel, carrying 2 folders and the posture of someone who already knew the ending and hated it. She didn't sit. She stood at the edge of the table, opened the first folder, and just said it. "We have a problem." Dalton slammed a hand down. "No kidding, our entire client base is evaporating under our nose because one guy decided to go rogue." Melissa didn't even blink. "He didn't go rogue. You handed him the ignition key and told him to follow protocol. And that's exactly what he's done." He froze. "What the hell does that mean?" She turned the folder toward the room and read aloud. "In the event of a role disruption or reassignment, the assigned strategist shall retain interim advisory privileges unless rescinded in writing by authorized counsel or senior ops. Clause 6C. It's in every legacy onboarding packet from 20 to mid-2021. Dalton scoffed. "That's a formality, legal fluff. It's not binding." Melissa raised a brow. "Then why has every client who's transitioned cited it in their disengagement notices?" Stacy from HR sank lower in her chair. "He drafted it," Melissa continued, "during the expansion phase, when legal was overloaded and we fast-tracked onboarding. No one flagged it because no one expected it to matter, and now it's the legal equivalent of an open side door, and 19 clients have walked through it." Dalton rubbed his temples. "Okay, fine. Let's get Ethan in here. Make him explain." Melissa didn't move. "He declined." Dalton's voice jumped an octave. "What do you mean he declined?" "He sent a one-liner through counsel," she replied, unfolding a page. "All actions remain compliant under the advisory clause you never rescinded. That's it." Someone exhaled too loudly, the kind of exhale people do when they realize the air's been sucked out of the room. Melissa flipped open the second folder. Inside were 2 printouts. One from the Secretary of State Registry, time-stamped 3 weeks ago, Continuum Advisory Partners, LLC. The second was a string of contract screenshots, each showing Ethan's name under the interim advisor line, highlighted neatly in blue. Then came the twist no one saw coming. Melissa cleared her throat. "Also, I've been looped into investor chatter. Soft pings, not formal, but they've started asking about continuity, about compliance terms, and about a specific employment clause embedded in the Series B term sheet." Dalton froze. "What clause?" Melissa pulled up her tablet, opened a doc, read aloud. "Material client retention will be verified via continued employment of E. Kane, lead strategist, employment clause to remain in effect until funding close." Silence. Real, cavernous silence. Dalton sat down slowly. The color drained from his face like someone had just cut a main artery of bravado. Melissa added quietly, "You fired the hinge, and now the door's off." At the far end of the room, one of the operations analysts, quiet, barely 25, looked up and asked the question that would haunt the rest of the week. "So, who forgot to tell the investors?" No one answered. But someone, probably Dalton, finally realized this wasn't just a leak. It was a precision-engineered flood. They delayed the call twice. First, it was technical issues, then schedule conflict. But everyone in that room knew the truth. They were stalling, trying to find a way to patch a sinking hull with duct tape and confidence. By the time the Zoom screen lit up, the anxiety in the room had curdled into a nauseating quiet. Then the lead investor joined. His name was Carter Renning, founding partner at Greyhawk Capital. 40 years in venture, face like stone, voice like a scalpel. You didn't get a second chance with Carter. You either delivered or you got remembered as a cautionary tale. He didn't bother with greetings. No small talk. No, "How's the weather in Boston?" He went straight to it. "I've been reviewing the Q2 projections," he said, tone flat, "and I'm noticing a pattern of client attrition linked directly to one name. Can someone walk me through what happened with Ethan Kane?" You could have heard a USB port click from across the room. Dalton sat forward. Ethan, misused a legal clause from years ago. We didn't catch it in time. We're responding." Carter didn't blink. "Did he violate any contracts?" Dalton hesitated. "Technically, no, but he exploited a loophole. It was buried in legacy agreements." Carter's face didn't move. "So he complied with the terms. You just failed to remove the terms." Melissa Wu nodded, her voice low. "Yes, that's accurate." Carter leaned back slightly. "And when was the clause last updated?" Silence. He continued, Who here reviewed the strategic retention conditions in the Series B term sheet? No one spoke. Not Dalton, not Melissa, not the CFO, not the internal counsel Virgin had rushed in from procurement last month. Carter exhaled slowly, then held something up to the camera. A printed copy of the Series B conditions. Not the investor deck, not the polished slideware, the document. He slid it toward his off-screen counsel, then read aloud. Clause 14D, sub-bullet 2. Client continuity shall be verified via the active employment of Mr. E. Kane through the conclusion of funding disbursement. Termination of said employee prior to contract completion constitutes breach of strategic continuity terms. Dalton's face went blank. Carter let it hang, let the weight of it settle like dust on a sealed tomb. Then he spoke again, same measured tone, but colder now. Did anyone here inform legal of Ethan Kane's termination prior to execution? No answer. Did anyone disclose to Greyhawk that your top client strategist, the one tied to the continuity clause, had been removed from payroll? Again, nothing. Carter shifted in his chair, not impatient, just done. This isn't a discussion about clauses anymore, he said. This is about misrepresentation. You had a contractual hinge holding your entire portfolio together, and you snapped it off because someone wanted a cleaner org chart. Melissa tried to speak. Tried to explain the chaos, the oversight, the fact that no one thought Ethan would act on the clause. But Carter just raised a hand. You thought he was irrelevant. He was the only part that mattered. Then, like a closing prayer, he ended with 4 words that landed harder than any shout. We're reviewing our position. And just like that, the floor dropped out from under Virgin for good. The moment Melissa whispered it, oh no, the room felt like it dropped 10 stories. No fire alarm, no screaming, just that one hushed phrase hanging there like the final breath before impact. And then nothing moved. Not Dalton, not the CFO, not even Stacy from HR, who looked like she was trying to melt into her chair's upholstery. The screen was still lit with Carter's face, cool as ever, eyes narrowed, like he'd already moved on to calculating the cleanup costs. Virgin's entire Series B round, $60 million in institutional lifeline, was now unstable. Because of a clause no one read, because of a man no one respected, because someone mistook silence for weakness. Dalton tried. God, he tried. He leaned forward, palms open, eyes wide with that desperate startup charm that only works on first dates and clueless interns. Let's not overcorrect here, he said. Yes, Ethan took advantage of a legal blind spot, but the spirit of the clause... Carter cut him off. No raise in volume, just razor-sharp articulation. There's no spirit in law, Mr. Mays, only terms, and he followed yours to the letter. That's not malicious compliance, that's exact compliance. You signed the leash and then acted surprised when it snapped. Dalton's jaw twitched. But the damage was predictable, Carter said, and entirely preventable. You didn't lose clients because Ethan was clever, you lost them because you forgot who was holding the reins. That was it. Stacy stood up halfway through the silence that followed. No speech, no eye contact, just grabbed her cardigan off the back of her chair and walked out the door like someone clocking out of retail for the last time. I saw her badge hit the desk before she made it to the elevator. That little click was louder than any apology. By 4:00 p.m., Dalton's calendar had been wiped clean, his access revoked. Administrative leave pending board review, which, at Virgin, is just corporate for, go pack up your desk before we shut off your Outlook account. Melissa didn't say, I told you so, but she didn't have to. Her silence was sharper than any I told you so could ever be. The real twist? By the time we were picking over cold conference room pastries trying to piece together what had just happened, a quiet update rolled through Slack. Vendor profile update. CAP Global Services. Preferred vendor for enterprise continuity strategy. Contact. Ethan Kane. Status, active, approved, 19 clients, 19 transitions, all seamless, all legal, all preferring Ethan's new firm over Virgin. Not out of revenge, not from rage, but because they trusted him to pick up the phone, deliver the answers, and never waste a single second posturing. I checked his LinkedIn that night. No gloating, no humble brag posts, no grateful to announce nonsense. Just a new tagline under his name. Continuity isn't a department, it's a discipline. And just like that, he didn't just walk away from Virgin. He inherited everything they forgot to respect. It's quiet now, no neon pitch decks, no salespeople pacing with AirPods, no leadership syncs bloated with buzzwords, just the soft hum of an old desk fan and the tap-tap of keys as Ethan Kane answered emails, one by one, from a second-floor office in a building no one would call flashy, but every client now knew by name. Continuum Advisory Partners, the front door read, etched in matte silver, clean and quiet like everything he built. The office wasn't big. 4 rooms, 1 assistant, a coffee machine that worked when it felt like it. But on his desk sat something Dalton never earned: trust. Every client file was updated, every call returned, every strategy tailored like a damn bespoke suit, because that's what Ethan did. While everyone else was chasing engagement metrics and gamifying the client journey, he was still doing the one thing no one else remembered how to do: deliver. The phone rang. He answered on the second ring. Ethan speaking. A pause, then. Of course, no disruption. We're ahead of schedule, actually. Another pause, a soft chuckle. Glad to hear it. Send the Q3 projections. We'll review by Thursday. He clicked the call off, jotted a note, sipped his coffee, the same black mug, same chipped handle. Some habits don't change. Then, without ceremony, his monitor pinged. Email from melissa.bu@Virgin Strategies. Calm subject. Request for external consulting. Body. Would you be available to consult on client retention strategy in preparation for a revised funding round? No pressure, just exploratory. Sent at 9:41 a.m. He stared at it for a beat. No gloating, no anger, just recognition. The wheel turns. The people who once called him overhead were now calling him essential. He typed, "Sure, just CCHR." Then hit send. No fanfare, no mic drop, just the truth, stated plainly, like every client memo he'd ever written. He leaned back, looked at the plaque on the wall. Continuum Advisory Partners. Below it, someone had added a single line in vinyl lettering, faint but deliberate, his assistant maybe, or one of the clients who noticed what he never said out loud. They made HR the gate. I just walked my clients through it, one by one. No vengeance, no chaos, just the clean, final sound of a bridge being reclaimed by its builder.